Sarah and David had been married for almost 10 years. Their life was simple, quiet, and filled with love. They had no children, but that never weakened their bond. In fact, it seemed to make them closer. Every evening, Sarah would brew tea while David sat beside her, and together they would watch the sun sink behind the rooftops of their neighborhood. Neighbors often whispered, "They don't have children, but look how happy they are." Their home is always full of peace, and indeed, their little house was filled with laughter, warmth, and gentle conversations. David worked at a small factory, and though the pay was modest, it was enough for them to live comfortably. Sarah kept their home tidy and cooked meals with care. Sometimes, when David returned tired from work, Sarah would greet him at the door with a smile that melted all his worries away. For Sarah, David was more than a husband. He was her best friend, her partner in every joy and sorrow. And for David, Sarah was the light that made his life brighter. They dreamed together of a future, even without children, believing that their love was strong enough to make up for what life had not given them. But fate, unpredictable and often cruel, had different plans. One late evening, David was riding his old motorcycle back from work. The road was wet from the rain, and the streetlights flickered weakly. Suddenly, a speeding truck lost control. Before David could react, the vehicle slammed into him. The sound of metal crashing echoed through the empty road. When Sarah received the phone call, her heart nearly stopped. She rushed to the hospital, her hands trembling, her breath heavy with fear. Hours passed as doctors worked to save David's life. Finally, the doctor came out with tired eyes and said, "He's alive, but the damage is severe. He may never walk again." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She rushed inside to see her husband lying pale and broken on the hospital bed. His body was weak, tubes connected, his face lifeless, but when his eyes slowly opened, Sarah leaned closer and whispered, "Don't worry, David, we will face this together. I am not leaving you." That night marked the beginning of their hardest journey. David was paralyzed from the waist down, unable to return to his work. Their small savings were drained by medical bills. The cozy home once filled with laughter now echoed with silence, fear, and uncertainty. Yet Sarah held on to her promise. She would not let despair destroy them. Their love had always been strong, but now it was about to be tested in ways neither had ever imagined. The days after David's accident were filled with quiet struggles. Sarah spent every waking moment caring for him. She helped him with his medicines, cooked meals, and made sure he never felt alone. But while her heart was steady, reality was merciless. The savings had dried up. Bills for food, rent, and medical care continued to arrive, and there was no income to pay them. David often sat silently in his wheelchair, his hands gripping the wooden arms tightly. His once bright eyes now carried the weight of guilt. One night, he finally broke the silence. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice heavy with shame. "I should be providing for us, not sitting here useless. You deserve so much better than this life." Sarah knelt beside him, holding his hand firmly. "Don't ever say that again. You are my husband, my partner. We promise to stand by each other in every storm. This is our test, David, and I will not let it break us." Despite her courage, Sarah knew something had to change. Their pantry was almost empty, and there was no money left for the next month's rent. She couldn't bear to see David worry every day, sinking deeper into guilt. She needed to do something, anything, to bring in money. The very next morning, Sarah walked to the local marketplace. With the little they had left, she rented a tiny space in the corner and bought a few crates of fruits and vegetables. It wasn't much, some apples, bananas, potatoes, and onions, but to Sarah, it felt like planting a seed of hope in dry soil. Her first day at the stall was harder than she had imagined. The sun was merciless, beating down on her as she called out to passers-by. Customers bargained, some walking away without buying anything. Her hands ached from lifting baskets. Her throat grew dry from calling out, yet she stayed strong. Each coin she earned felt like a small victory. But the real challenge awaited her at home. After closing the stall, Sarah hurried back, her feet sore and her body drained. David was waiting for her, trying to hide his worry. "You must be tired," he said softly. Sarah smiled, though her shoulders ached. "It's nothing. I just need to rest a little." That night, lying awake beside him, Sarah's mind was restless. How long could she continue like this, working at the stall all day, then rushing home to care for David? It was breaking her physically and emotionally. But she had no choice. She was determined not to give up. As she closed her eyes, she whispered a prayer. "God, give me strength. Show me a way where I can provide for him and still be by his side." Little did she know, an idea would soon come to her. One that would not only ease her burden, but also reveal the true kindness hidden in the hearts of people. The following week was even tougher on Sarah. Each morning, she woke before sunrise, prepared David's breakfast, gave him his medicines, and then rushed to the marketplace. She stood all day behind her small stall, calling out to customers with a smile, even when her legs ached and her throat grew dry. At home, she would return to find David waiting for her. Sometimes he tried to act cheerful, asking her about the stall, but Sarah could see the sadness behind his eyes. He hated feeling like a burden. Sarah never let him think that why she would sit by his side, tell him stories of the market, and remind him that they were in this together. But deep inside, Sarah was exhausted. She could not leave David alone for long. Yet she had to stay at the stall to earn money. It was a battle between her duty as a caregiver and her struggle as a breadwinner. One evening after closing the stall, Sarah sat alone in the market corner. She watched other vendors counting their earnings while chatting with friends. She, however, felt utterly drained. The question that haunted her was simple. How can I be in two places at once? How can I take care of David and the stall together? That night, while feeding David his dinner, an unusual thought crossed her mind. What if I could leave the stall unattended, but in a way that people could still buy honestly? At first, the idea seemed impossible. Would people really pay without anyone watching them? The next morning, Sarah decided to test her idea. She took a large cardboard sheet, wrote with bold letters, "Take what you need, leave the money in the box. Honesty is the price." She placed a wooden box with a slot beside the sign and hung a small basket for plastic bags. Then she neatly arranged the fruits and vegetables, each with its price written clearly on small notes. Sarah's heart pounded as she prepared to leave the stall unattended for a while. She needed to go home to check on David. As she walked away, she prayed silently, "Please, God, let people be honest." When she returned an hour later, her eyes widened in shock. The stall was not only untouched, but the money box had coins and bills inside. Some customers had taken goods and left the exact amount. Others had even left extra, perhaps moved by the trust she had shown them. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. She could take care of David without losing the stall. That night, when she told David what had happened, he looked at her with awe. "Sarah, you trusted strangers and they didn't betray you. Maybe this is God's way of helping us." Sarah smiled through her tears. She had taken a risk out of desperation, but what she discovered was something far greater: the hidden goodness in people's hearts. The next morning, Sarah set up her stall with renewed hope. She wrote the same sign again, making it neater this time. "Take what you need. Leave the money in the box. Honesty keeps us alive." She arranged the fruits and vegetables carefully, placed the box in the middle, and whispered a prayer before leaving for home to care for David. When she returned 2 hours later, she was astonished once again. Not only was everything in order, but the box had even more money than expected. Some people had paid more than the listed price. A few had even left small notes that said things like, "Stay strong, sister. We are praying for you." Word spread quickly in the neighborhood. People were curious about the honesty stall. Some came just to see if it was real. To their surprise, it was. The goods were fresh, the prices fair, and no one was watching. Yet most people respected the trust Sarah had placed in them. Many even chose to pay extra, knowing the money would help her care for her sick husband. At home, Sarah shared the stories with David. He listened with tears in his eyes. Sarah, you've given people a chance to prove their goodness, and they're proving it every day. This is nothing short of a miracle." Sarah smiled softly. "Maybe it's not a miracle. David, maybe it's just that when you trust people, they rise to the trust." Over the weeks, Sarah's stall became more than just a shop. It became a symbol of faith and honesty. Strangers visited from nearby streets, some even traveling from other towns after hearing about it. They didn't just buy vegetables, they came to encourage Sarah, to support her, and to be part of something pure. One afternoon, while Sarah was arranging the goods, a young mother approached her. She placed a few coins in the box and picked up some apples. Before leaving, she whispered, "I could have taken these without paying, but your trust stopped me. Thank you for reminding me of what it means to be honest." Sarah's eyes welled up. She realized her stall was teaching lessons beyond her imagination. Financially, things started improving. There were days when Sarah made more money than she ever had before. She used some of it for household needs, but most went straight into David's treatment fund. Slowly, they could afford better medicines, therapy sessions, and regular doctor checkups. For the first time since the accident, David's health began to improve. His face, once shadowed with guilt, now carried hope. He smiled more often, sometimes even laughing with Sarah like he used to. The stall that had begun as a desperate solution was now transforming their lives. And deep in her heart, Sarah knew this was only the beginning of their journey. As the weeks passed, Sarah's stall became a small legend in the town. People began referring to it as the honesty stall. Some would come just to witness the unusual setup, while others came faithfully every day to buy vegetables and fruits. Sarah noticed something remarkable. Customers no longer treated her like just another vendor. They treated her with respect, almost as if she was carrying a sacred responsibility. They admired her courage, her devotion to David, and most of all, her trust in strangers. One elderly man who bought potatoes regularly once told her, "Child, you may think you're just selling vegetables, but you're actually selling hope." People come here not only for food, but to remind themselves that honesty still exists. Sarah was touched by his words. She realized that her stall had grown into something much bigger than she had ever planned. At home, David followed her stories with fascination. Though he couldn't yet walk, his spirit had changed. He no longer looked defeated. He often told Sarah, "When I recover, I want to stand beside you at that stall. Not because you need help, but because I want to be part of what you've built." The extra money coming in was helping them more than they had ever imagined. David was able to attend physiotherapy sessions regularly, and his doctors grew hopeful about his chances of partial recovery. Sarah's face glowed with quiet pride each time she saw David working harder, refusing to give up. But the stall was not without challenges. There were still days when Sarah feared someone might cheat her, take goods without paying, or even steal the money box. Yet every time she returned, her faith was restored. The money was there, sometimes even more than expected. People left encouraging notes, prayers, and even small gifts for David's treatment. One day, Sarah found a note tucked beneath the money in the box. It read, "I lost my father in an accident last year. I know how painful it is. Please accept this small donation for your husband's recovery. May God heal him soon." Along with the note was a folded bill larger than any sale she had made that day. Sarah clutched the note to her heart, tears streaming down her cheeks. When she showed it to David, he cried too. The kindness of strangers was overwhelming. As months went by, Sarah's life settled into a new rhythm. She still worked hard, balancing her duties at the stall with caring for David. But now she carried hope in her heart. She was no longer fighting alone. The entire community seemed to be standing with her. Her honesty had planted a seed, and it was blossoming into a garden of compassion all around them. David's recovery was slow, but it was happening. The physiotherapy sessions, funded by the stall's earnings and the generosity of strangers, were beginning to show results. He could now move his legs slightly and was learning to transfer himself from the bed to the wheelchair with less assistance. For Sarah, each small step felt like a miracle. Every evening, she would tell him stories of the stall, of the customers who came, of the kindness they showed, and of the small surprises she found in the honesty box. Sometimes she would read aloud the notes people left behind. David would listen with tears in his eyes, his heart swelling with both gratitude and hope. One evening, Sarah returned home tired but smiling. "You won't believe this, David," she said, placing the money box on the table. Today, a group of school children came to the stall. They each bought just one apple, but all of them paid double the price. When I asked why, they said, "Because we want to help your husband get better." David covered his face with his hands and wept silently. "Sarah, what have we done to deserve such kindness?" Sarah touched his shoulder gently. "Maybe it's not about deserving, David. Maybe it's about faith. When you trust people, when you show them honesty, they respond with their hearts." Meanwhile, Sarah herself was changing. She'd always been strong, but now she carried a new kind of strength born from struggle, sacrifice, and hope. Customers noticed it too. Many would tell her, "You inspire us. Sarah, you remind us that even in the darkest times, light can be found." The stall was thriving. Some days, Sarah earned more than she needed. Instead of keeping it all, she began setting aside a portion for others in need. When a poor widow came by, Sarah would quietly slip extra potatoes or fruits into her bag without charging more. She had learned that kindness multiplied. It had lifted her life, and now she wanted to share it. At the hospital, David's doctor grew more optimistic. "With consistent therapy, David, you may not only stand again, but also walk with support. It will take time, but the progress is promising." Hearing those words, David's eyes shone with hope. That night, he told Sarah, "The day I take my first step, I want it to be toward your stall. I want the world to see that our love and faith carried us through." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with pride and love. "And I will be right there, waiting for you." The couple's journey was still difficult, but the road no longer looked hopeless. For the first time since the accident, Sarah and David dared to dream again. And in those dreams, the honesty stall stood as a beacon of faith, resilience, and love, a reminder that sometimes, when life breaks you, it also builds you stronger. Emily had reached a breaking point. Every day felt heavier than the last. Balancing David's care, the stall, and the household was more than she could bear. Yet she refused to complain. Each night, after feeding David and finishing the day's chores, she sat by the window, staring at the empty streets, wondering how much longer she could keep going. One morning, exhausted beyond words, she came up with a desperate idea. She found a large wooden board and painted simple words on it. "Take what you need, leave what it costs." She placed the board at the stall, arranged the fruits and vegetables neatly, and tied a small cloth bag to the side for money. Then she returned inside to take care of David, praying silently that people would not take advantage of her trust. To her surprise, when she checked the stall in the evening, the bag was filled with coins and bills. Every item that was taken had been paid for, and in some cases, people had left extra money. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "There's still goodness in the world," she whispered to herself. The following days confirmed it. Customers respected the sign, taking only what they needed and paying fairly. Some even slipped in notes of encouragement. "Stay strong. We are with you." Others left small baskets of food or medicine, quietly helping the couple without saying a word. Emily realized that her little stall had become more than a shop. It was a symbol of trust, honesty, and a community. And though she still struggled, a small spark of hope lit up inside her heart. When she told David about it, he smiled weakly, his eyes shining. "You see, Emily, the world hasn't given up on us, and neither should we." For the first time since the accident, Emily allowed herself to believe that better days might come. Weeks turned into months. In the small fruit and vegetable shop run by, Emily grew into something larger than she had ever dreamed. The handwritten sign that read, "Take what you need, leave what it costs," became more than just a message. It became a symbol of trust in their little community. Every day, customers would come, buy their goods, and leave the exact payment in the hanging tin. Some even left extra bills, whispering silent prayers for Emily's husband, David, to recover fully. Emily often found herself wiping tears from her cheeks as she counted, the money at the end of its day. Realizing that the honesty of strangers was carrying them through the darkest time of their lives. David was improving too. He still needed care and couldn't walk much, but he had started sitting up and even helping Emily with small tasks like sorting fruits or writing lists. Seeing him smile again filled Emily's heart with strength. But it wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about gratitude. Emily began setting aside a small portion of the extra money she received to help others. Sometimes she would secretly slip a bag of apples or a basket of fresh vegetables into the hands of a struggling mother or an old man who didn't have enough to pay. Her shop had turned into more than just a place of business. It had become a place of kindness. One evening, as Emily closed the shop, she looked at David and said softly, "Maybe God sent us this trial to show us the beauty that still exists in people's hearts." David nodded, his voice quiet but steady. "And to remind us that love, yours for me, mine for you, can survive anything." Their bond, tested by hardship, had only grown stronger. Emily no longer felt alone in her struggle. She felt surrounded by invisible hands of support, honesty, and love. One crisp autumn morning, Emily unlocked the shop as usual. The cool breeze carried the scent of apples, and the streets were alive with children heading to school. She set out baskets of oranges, carrots, and fresh tomatoes, then adjusted the sign that had become famous in their little town. "Take what you need, leave what it costs." That day, something unusual happened. A man in a neat suit stopped in front of the shop. He stood there for several minutes, reading the sign over and over. Finally, he picked up a basket of grapes, dropped more than double the price into the tin, and asked Emily quietly, "Do you really trust people this much?" Emily smiled gently. "I have no choice but to trust. And when you trust, people surprise you." The man nodded thoughtfully but didn't say more. He left, but something about him stayed in Emily's mind. Later that afternoon, when she opened the tin, she found a folded note along with the money he had dropped. It read, "I am the manager of a nearby grocery chain. Your honesty has touched me. If you ever wish to expand this shop into something bigger, please reach out." Emily's hands trembled as she read the note. She looked over at David, who was resting on a chair nearby. "Do you see this?" she whispered, her voice shaking with hope. David smiled weakly but with pride. "Emily, maybe this is the beginning of something new. You turned our hardship into something beautiful. Now maybe it's time the world sees it too." That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about everything, how she had once been so afraid, how she struggled to balance the shop and caring for David, and how strangers' honesty had saved them. Now, she wondered if she could take a step forward, not just for herself and David, but for all the people who believed in her little shop. The next morning, Emily made her decision. She would meet the man from the note. The following day, Emily held the folded note tightly in her hand as she walked through town. The address scribbled at the bottom led her to a modest office building. Her heart pounded as she climbed the steps she had never imagined herself walking into a business meeting. Inside, she was greeted by the man from the shop. He introduced himself warmly. "My name is Mr. Anderson. I've been in the grocery business for over 20 years. But what you're doing, it's different. It's powerful. People talk about it everywhere." Emily blushed. "It's nothing extraordinary. I just didn't have enough hands to watch the shop and care for my husband. So I trusted people, to be honest." Mr. Anderson leaned forward. "That's exactly why it's extraordinary. In a time when so many doubt others, you've created a place where honesty thrives. That's where Rand, it inspires people." He explained his idea to help her expand the shop, make it more organized, and perhaps even open a second stall. He promised to cover initial costs, on one condition that Emily continue running the shop with the same trust and transparency. Emily's first instinct was hesitation. She thought about David, about how much responsibility already weighed on her shoulders. But then she remembered the faces of the neighbors who had supported her, the children who waved when they passed her stall, and the strangers who left extra money for David's treatment. This wasn't just her story anymore, it belonged to the community. I'll try, Emily finally said, her voice firm. But I want to make sure this shop never loses its honesty. That's the heart of it. Mr. Anderson smiled. Then we'll build it around that heart. When Emily returned home and told David everything, tears filled his eyes. Emily, you've turned our pain into hope, not just for us, but for everyone who believes in goodness. That night, for the first time in months, David held her hand a little stronger. Emily could feel his strength slowly returning, and deep down, she knew their lives were shifting towards something brighter. Within weeks of her meeting with Mr. Anderson, changes began to take shape. He arranged for a small renovation of Emily's stall. Wooden shelves replaced the old crates. The tin box was upgraded to a secure cash drawer, and a painted signboard now hung proudly above the shop. The honest stall, take what you need, leave what it costs. The new look didn't take away the simplicity. Instead, it highlighted the trust that made the place unique. Curious townsfolk and even people from nearby villages began visiting, just to see the shop where honesty ruled. Some would buy small bundles of vegetables, while others came to leave extra coins in the drawer. Whispering blessings for Emily and David as they did, Emily was overwhelmed. She had never imagined such kindness. Even more surprising was the effect it had on David. Each morning, she wheeled him outside to sit near the shop. He loved watching people interact with the sign, smiling when someone dropped extra money or teaching children about fairness. Slowly, his spirit began to lift. One afternoon, a local newspaper journalist arrived, eager to write about the little stall that had become a symbol of trust. Emily was nervous at first, but David encouraged her to share their story. "People need to hear this, Emily," he said softly. "Maybe it will remind them that the world still has goodness." The article was published the following week. Almost overnight, more customers came flooding in. Some brought flowers, others offered to help stock the shelves, and many simply came to shake Emily's hand and tell her how much her courage inspired them. Meanwhile, David's doctors noticed remarkable improvement in his recovery. His body was healing slowly, but it was his heart and mind that showed the most change. "Hope is the best medicine," one doctor told Emily, smiling knowingly. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt the weight on her shoulders ease. The shop was thriving, her husband was healing, and the future no longer looked so frightening. Winter gave way to spring, and with the changing season came new life for David and Emily. Every morning, David insisted on walking a few steps outside their home. At first it was shaky and painful, but Emily stood by his side, her arm steadying him. The neighbors often paused to cheer him on, clapping as though he were running a marathon. Each step David took felt like a victory, not just for him, but for both of them. At the stall, things were busier than ever. The Honest Stall had become a landmark in the town. Parents brought their children to teach them about integrity, while travelers passing through stopped to witness the little miracle of trust. Emily often overheard people say, "If one woman could trust us all this much, then maybe we should learn to trust each other too." David began helping at the stall again, first by sitting on a chair behind the counter, then slowly by standing for short periods. Emily's heart swelled the day he counted change for a customer on his own. "You're back where you belong," she whispered with a smile. One evening, as they closed the stall together, David took Emily's hands in his. His eyes glistened with emotion. "Emily, when the accident happened, I thought I had lost everything, my strength, my purpose, my ability to take care of you. But you carried us both. You became my strength." Emily shook her head gently. "No, David, we carried each other. You gave me faith when I thought I couldn't go on, and together, we found a way." The sun set behind them, casting golden light over the little shop that had saved their lives. It was more than a business now, it was a symbol of love, honesty, and resilience. As the town settled into night, Emily and David walked home hand in hand. Their journey had been full of pain and struggle, but it had also been filled with kindness, trust, and hope. And in that moment, they knew one thing for certain: no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Their story was far from over, it was only a new beginning.